swiftly moving on to our next panel, and I have a very, very exciting, we're calling it, Rispa, was it a familist? A funnel. A funnel. You learn something new every day. It's an all, we're quite similar in the way we look. And I'd like to invite my panelists to join us virtually and physically. With me here right now is my senior in the profession, Honorable Catherine Muma. She's nominated senator here in Kenya and a very well-versed legal professional, and she's here with a wealth of knowledge to join this panel. We're also joined by Anika Zinke, a digital policy advisor in the Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee at the EU. Welcome, Anika. I see her there. Anika, if you could switch on your camera, just as we do the intros. We're also joined by Honorable Phumzile Van Dam. She's the former Member of Parliament in South Africa. And Honorable do you say Phumzile or Phumzile? I need you to teach me.
Phumzile, you don't have to call me Honorable. I haven't been a member of Parliament for a while.
Phumzile is fine, right?
Fine, yeah.
Thank you so much. So those are my panelists. I'd like to welcome you to the second and last day of this wonderful festival. We have a very interesting hour ahead of us. And just to set us off, I'd like to ask you to introduce yourselves briefly for a minute. Tell us what you're doing, where you are currently, and the work that you're doing. And then we'll go into a Q&A and have an interactive session in the coming hour. I'll have a set of questions for you, as well as take questions and comments that are coming in on our chat. So I'll start with my co-host panelist, Honorable Catherine. I really welcome you today, and thank you for joining us. We're delighted to have you here today at the Lawyers Hub. I know you have a busy schedule at the Senate, and we don't take it for granted that you're here. Could you please introduce yourself to those who don't know you, and just tell us what you're doing currently in the space that you're in?
Thank you very much. My name is Catherine Muma, currently serving as a nominated senator, nominated to represent women in the Senate of Kenya. I am also a member of the African Parliamentary Caucus on Internet Governance. And I'm also Kenya's representative to the Interparliamentary Union. And I am a member of the Working Group on Science and Technology at the IPU, where we've been discussing matters relating to science and technology, including AI. Professionally, I'm a lawyer, human rights lawyer. Have previously worked on matters relating to women's rights, children's rights, and rights of other vulnerable people, and also socioeconomic rights. I've served on the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. I've served on the Constitutional Implementation Commission and the Attorney General's as my very first job after qualification. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Next, we'll have Anika. Anika, please introduce yourself. Briefly tell us what you're doing, the work that you're doing in the space that you're in currently.
Yeah, my name is Anika Zinke. I'm based in Brussels. I'm a digital policy advisor for the European Parliament, Green's EFA Group. And I've been working on the AI Act for the past 3 years, actually. And apart from that, I worked on the Digital Services Act, which is another big tech law that the EU came out with recently, and other tech legislations. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here and talk a bit more about the AI Act.
Thank you, Anika, and it's lovely to have you with us today. Phumzile.
Yes, hi.
Unjani.
Yupilile unjani. Hello, I'm Pumzile. I'm a South African, but living in Oslo at the moment. So I was a member of parliament in South Africa until 2021. So for the last kind of 3 years, I've moved into this space where it's the human rights and technology intersect. So I've consulted mostly with kind of non-profit sector organizations. I've worked with USAID and international aid. So the last 2 projects I worked with them was one around infusing human rights and values in their digital development work, and also how to help sub-Saharan African organizations on how to counter digital threats to democracy. I've just completed a fellowship at Harvard on technology and human rights. And kind of my area of interest in terms of policy and legislation is around generative AI and the use of generative AI during election campaigns. I'm currently kind of conceptualizing how we regulate it, because I think it's a really complex subject to try and navigate. So that is kind of the issue I'm really passionate about. But yeah, I do a lot of things. I'm also, in terms of gender, I'm on the advisory council for the global partnership against technology facilitated GBV. So it's a gathering of different governments discussing ways in which we can counter GBV in online spaces.
Fantastic, and congrats on this wonderful educational achievement at Harvard. Now, I'll start with you on this question that I'm asking about the AI in your country. I want you to comment about South Africa, Pumzile, and just tell us briefly, your thoughts on the current status of AI in your country.
Yeah, so I look at AI from specifically a democratic perspective and how the use of AI affects democratic processes. So I've worked on a project, it's the one I'm currently working on exploring how generative AI was used in our recent election, which was held in May. I think ahead of the 2024 election cycle, I'm sure all of you would have heard, and Annika can probably speak to this too, was that there was a big fear that generative AI would result in a deluge of disinformation. The problem would get much worse than it has already been. So I've had a look at a couple of elections, and what I've noticed is that the impact of AI has been different, and it's influenced by a whole range of factors. And part of those are around kind of the strength of the information ecosystem in each country. So it wasn't as bad in South Africa. And part of the reason was that South Africa is a relatively strong democracy with a strong independent media, one where there's high levels of internet freedom, and therefore that served as a resilience factor against AI-related disinformation. But that's not to say it couldn't be a threat going forward. And what I've been having lots of discussions with different people in the field about how we deal with generative AI in elections. So for an example, in the Indonesian election, the current president used generative AI to kind of reframe how he was perceived. So he created an AI-generated avatar, which was this cute, cuddly grandpa, which was very separate from the kind of persona that he was. So that was a way in which generative AI was used for digital campaigning purposes. But can we term that as disinformation if a politician kind of alters the way that they are perceived? So it's a very complex topic, and I'm so glad to be here today with lawyers because it's an issue we need to consider. Do we say that there must never be any use of generative AI during election campaigns for any political messaging? But then the other side is for campaigners. I know in Kenya during the recent protests, activists use generative AI as a way to campaign. So it's a very complex topic to kind of traverse. But yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of hearing what else everyone thinks about that. But I think it's a very exciting time for the legal profession and for people working in this field. It's a new topic, and how do we best find the ways of leveraging the benefits of AI while mitigating against its harms?
Thank you. And interesting, you talk about elections and that you're excited to be with lawyers. And luckily for you, one of your panelists is a lawyer and a Kenyan. Honorable Muma, what would you say for, around this interesting topic that she's just mentioned about generative AI? Of course, you'll build into what you already know in terms of the background of what we're dealing with in Kenya. But your comment on her experience in South Africa, and then just bring it closer home and what the landscape looks like.
Thank you very much. First, AI is actually a product of science and technology. And what we need to ask ourselves, how can we ensure that science and technology is used to better the operations of society while protecting against violations, particularly violations of rights? And I think that is the big question we need to ask ourselves. Just like in South Africa, Kenya is one of the countries where AI is used in all sectors, and we have also had experiences with suspicion of fraudulent use of AI in our elections. You will recall the conversation around the presidential elections, indicating that there may have been some fraudulent dealing because of the use of AI. She is right. Recently, we had the most powerful organization on protests by our Gen Zs, again, assisted, in my view, for good, assisted technologies that in mobilizing the country around issues. And we've also had, particularly for female politicians, we've had a lot of violence, particularly gender violence, targeted at ladies, particularly lady politicians, and oftentimes even other young ladies and women under the backdrop of a patriarchal society. So AI is good, can actually be useful to society, but AI also has risks and challenges. And the question we need to ask ourselves, have we allowed scientists to run ahead without holding back in terms of holding them accountable, in terms of how the products that they come up with can be used in society? In Kenya, we have a very strong constitution on human rights. It protects the right to privacy, for instance, also allows the right to access information, including information on governance. But that law was passed before we moved technologically to where we are today. And I think the gap is that the scientists are running ahead in their own closet. The policymakers are running in their own lane. The lawyers are also running in their own lane. And as a result, you find that there is technology that is being used unchecked. So we need to ask ourselves, is it time to ensure that we have conversation between policymakers and scientists in order to ensure that the AI technologies and solutions that are developed are useful to society and are protective of the rights, different rights within society? It is something that, a conversation that Africa must particularly start having.
Thank you, and very timely question there that I want to pass on to Annika. Annika, you know, in Africa we've borrowed a lot from the EU in terms of policy and draft legislation that we've employed across different sectors. You know, regarding technology such as the data protection laws in Kenya heavily borrow from the GDPR. So is it time, like Catherine is asking, is it time for us to have a conversation between the scientists and the regulators and the lawyers and so on and so forth? And given the background that you are in, having developed and worked on AI quite a bit in Europe, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I can wholeheartedly agree with my previous speaker. It was very, very nice to hear. I think it's absolutely time. And actually, one of the big issues that we faced over the years that we were working on this law was that many people were saying, why are you doing this so early? Let the technology develop first, and then we can regulate. And the EU is always too early to regulate. And on the other hand, then ChatGPT came out, and many people said, why don't we have a law? Why don't we have anything to protect us against this? There's so many questions of intellectual property, data protection, people fearing for their jobs. Why isn't the EU doing anything? So I think there, depending on what technology is just on vogue at the moment and what is out, there are different perceptions, but I fully agree that the time is now, and that there are certain principles that we can put into the law that are not dependent on one certain technology, but that put into the law how we would like AI systems and models to look like in the future. And that doesn't have to be only on ChatGPT, but that can mean many different AI systems and models. And those principles can then also allow for more safety and trustworthiness, and also accountability of those who produce and develop AI systems and models. And I think also, especially around the time when ChatGPT came out, we saw a lot of people who were really worried about AI systems and models and how they work and whether the technology is moving too fast. And I think legislation can also help to build some trustworthiness and trust to the government within the public if you have certain principles in place. So I think it's definitely a very good time to have this conversation now. And also, as you said, really talk to researchers and the academic community who are doing amazing work. And that was also a huge asset that we really had in the EU AI negotiations, that we talked to a lot of researchers, for instance, from Stanford, who really gave us so much important input on how to make the law, and to make the law really future-proof and not just proof for the next 2 years.
Thanks, Annika. And as a policy advisor in the EU and having the benefit of, you know, being fast on the scene in terms of artificial intelligence and technology, what are the priority areas that you're advising, you know, the EU? Because we're likely to, as we develop our own policies and regulation and regulatory regimes, what are you proposing in Europe?
So I think the main areas that also the AI Act is covering now are safety, fundamental rights, cybersecurity, and the environment. Broadly speaking, there's also a few more, but just to put it a bit broader, there are also a few other laws that tie in with the AI Act that came out in the last few years. And I really think also coming from my background, which is from the Green Party, environment and fundamental rights are really key areas that I feel like, especially when we talk very much about technology and innovation, are sometimes forgotten, and really also the impact on humans, the issues we have with mitigating bias, but also the issues we have around these very power-hungry systems and models, and how we have enough energy in order to develop them and sustain them. That's a conversation that we really want to wanted to put into the AI Act, and that had also very much advocacy when we were negotiating. So asking tech companies to disclose how much energy their models consume is something that many people didn't want to, and also really asking companies to think, how is this exact system impacting your employees or the humans that you will use it on, wasn't the easiest conversation to have, but are definitely priority areas and talks that we had in the discussions.
I have the same question for you, Pumzile. What are the priority areas in terms of legislation or policy that you're dealing with or that you know of happening in South Africa?
Yes. So the work that I do has kind of broadened beyond South Africa and more kind of at a continental and global level. And just to kind of take the conversation back to what the two last speakers have said, I think a huge problem is indeed that technology and innovation will always be far ahead of regulation and legislation. And I specifically think it of great importance in Africa in particular for there to be greater accountability in terms of the platforms. And there's definitely a lot to learn from the EU in that regard. What I have seen as a kind of former legislator and someone who is kind of looking at the field from a regulatory perspective, I feel that African leaders need to be doing far more to protect Africans from the harms from technology, from social media platforms. I really think it's way past overdue. And I don't think it may seem incredibly complex. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I think the EU is the global leader in terms of in that space. Now, that's not to say that we should whole scale take what is done there and just implement it in African countries. It's very important to also consider issues around what it means for an AI system to be available in Africa. Is their contribution in terms of design? I heard earlier Vugosi speaking around large language models and African languages not being included in that. So do we have a voice at the design stage? When we're talking about the design of technological systems, are those considerations taken in place? So if we're going to look at regulation and legislation, we need to consider all those issues. And if we're saying that certain technologies are going to be operational in Africa, do they cater for issues like that? At the global level where technology is governed, are there African voices at that level? At multilateral bodies, are the concerns of Africans being taken on board? So I agree with both our speakers. I think it's way past overdue. And I don't think it's possible to kind of legislate as soon as technology comes, because there's going to be something new in another year. And then we can't try and keep a pace. I think there are frameworks in place. There's a Kenyan constitution, there's a South African constitution. And around that, and saying there are very specific values that we have as different African countries. We value transparency, like the EU has said, around how technologies are built. We value fairness. For us, it's inclusiveness, which could be a value for Africans to say, we need inclusiveness, we need technologies to kind of be catered and include African perspectives when they're designed and deployed. That greater collaboration and consultation before, technologies are given the green light.
Okay, thank you. Greater collaboration, protection of the citizens. Honorable Muma, I think I want you to address this question from a perspective of what regulation does in terms of innovation. If you think about, this is technology, it's growing, it's new, every day it's changing. Vis-a-vis our rights, is there a possibility of sliding into, over-regulation so that even you're curtailing the freedom of expression, for example? So given from the Kenyan context that you'd really built on quite well when you started, and the comments by Pumzile and Anika, what would you say is the key priority areas in terms of legislation or regulation going forward? Because, like you said, we can't just operate, in a free fall.
Now, first, I think we need to acknowledge that, largely speaking, the current AI products are situated elsewhere. And Kenya and other African countries are actually using products that are developed and situated elsewhere. So the first thing for the African countries, I would say, is we need to invest more in our universities in terms of research on matters AI, to recognize the fact that the future in all sectors is going to be driven by tech.
Yeah.
I don't think we are putting, at least for Kenya, I don't think enough money is being put to ensure that we are well prepared to understand matters tech for purposes of driving our health sector, driving our agriculture sector, and all the other sectors, which means we would be using products that are developed elsewhere. And if you're using products that are developed elsewhere, sometimes you'll be playing catch up or doing cut and paste on what has happened in Europe to bring it to apply to us. So I feel we could do more in terms of preparing our own human resource and expertise around matters AI in order to have good policies. Why do I say so? As a member of parliament, we don't have any inherent knowledge on how to make a good law. So I may come up with a law to try and deal with social bullying, and if I am not well informed, I may very well come up with a law,
anti-protest bill,
or something of the sort, that you may end up with something that causes more harm than good.
Exactly.
And that's why I keep insisting that it helps if you are, before I make that law, I am able to interact with the tech experts, I'm able to interact with the scientists to be able to know how do we move on this.
Yes.
That is at the national level. So we need to get that expertise. We need to train lawyers. We need to train the parliamentarians. We need to train those in the executive to know what kind of law they're making. At the global level, because the products we are using are currently all over, what's happening on Google is something that requires that we think across board. In the Interparliamentary Union, we've actually drafted an IPU, Charter on Ethics of Science and Technology. And we are putting in provisions on AI in order to be able to caution the scientists. So the first regulation would be proceed and innovate as you wish, but can we ensure that whatever you are innovating does not cross the line in terms of violation of human rights and violation of ethics. So we are currently, we have a draft on that. The IPU will have a meeting in Geneva in October. We hope that the member states will adopt that charter, and that charter will be touching on ethics of science and technology. So we have broad ethical standards that remind the scientists that even as you're developing this fantastic technology, if it is technology that is going to be used to eliminate or to cause genocide or to cheat, to facilitate cheating in elections, or to do this, then you're crossing the line when it comes to ethics and human rights.
Let me ask you to just delve a little deeper, and I'm sure my other panelists, Anika and Pumzile, relate to this. in Kenya, we had a situation where somebody came in and they were taking citizens' data using, there's a technology they were using to scan the irises of citizens. This is WorldCoin, and paying citizens some money. What kind of measures can be put in place? Because to date, I don't think there's been any development really, other than summoning the CS who was questioned in Parliament about the activities that were happening. Yet you have private citizens' data out there, but the balance was that these people were getting paid. Will you stop people from getting paid to surrender their private rights? What is the role of Parliament or even a government to its citizens when it comes to privacy?
Now, Kenya has a data protection law, but that data protection law was largely focused on, number one, access by government to data and protection of citizens from misuse of that data by government. At the time we did the data protection law, or at the time we developed that bill, and it happened while I was at the Commission for the Implementation of the Constitution in 2024, but it was enacted much later. We were thinking data in the hands of government and the misuse of citizen data by government. Now, since then, technology has moved so fast.
Yes.
And we need to consider that the person who came in and was able to enter a contract managed to do so because there is no prohibiting clause that we could say is a clause that prohibiting a citizen from, or a private actor from getting data from the citizens and using it as they wish. So what we need, and that's why we're saying we're playing catch up.
Yes.
We need to know, we need to revise that law to be able to say, now that data can actually be in the hands of private actors and misused, what kind of regulations do we need to put in place?
Yes.
But we have actually a data protection commission. We have a data commission. I think they might be sleeping on the job. Those are some of the things that such a commission should be contemplating, should be actually every so often imagining what are the new ways in which data can be protected.
Yeah.
And they ought to have by now contemplated the new emerging ways of abuse of data, yeah, and use of that data, even on internet.
Yeah.
So it is something that I believe we have a body in place which possibly needs to review how it works, and that body would be best placed to actually bring reviews of the legislation in Parliament in order for us to be able to do this.
Thank you. Very powerful comments there. Annika, what are the successes that you've had in the EU? Just maybe highlight one or two specific successes that you faced in implementing AI regulations, and how we can benefit from your experience in Africa. As you heard, Catherine says we are playing catch up, which is true. So successes and how we can avoid pitfalls here.
Mm-hmm. I think, broadly speaking, the biggest success was actually getting this law. Because I mentioned it earlier, there were a lot of people who were very much pushing a very hesitant approach and saying it's too early, we need to wait, innovation can only thrive if we don't regulate. And I think also thanks to ChatGPT and the whole discussion coming up on generative AI, we were able to shift the conversation a bit, also a bit further to the safety approach, and really saying, if we want safe and trustworthy AI in the EU, and possibly also in the world, we need certain principles that need to be upheld, and they need to put in the law in order for people to really trust the AI. And these principles and provisions really need to be put into law and to be followed. And we really faced a lot of adversary, especially from tech companies. I mean, probably many of you are aware that tech companies spend hundreds of millions of euros to lobby against certain tech legislations, especially in the EU, because the EU is often quite early in this, and we really had a lot of issues in trying to really get provisions into the law that would really stick and would really have an impact, even though many companies already have very good governance systems in place. But if they only do them for themselves, they're not really accountable to the enforcer. So they don't really, they only help to a certain degree. So really getting these principles in, like I mentioned earlier, cybersecurity, risk management, transparency, as Lucila mentioned as well. I think that is our really big win, that we also did not let the tech lobbyists like push us completely out of any meaningful regulation. And also talking to academia a lot, as I mentioned earlier, I think was a really, really big plus that I can really also recommend to any country who wants to work on regulation in the area of AI. But really also making sure that even if tech lobbyists tell you this is not possible, this is going too far, we cannot do this, always verify if this is really the case. Talk to leading experts in the field, and not let yourself be pushed really into a regulation that actually doesn't have any meaning. So I think that was, the biggest worry or risk that we had running into the negotiations, and also the biggest success, that we have a law that is robust. That of course could be better. I don't want to say that the law is perfect, and I think there are many other approaches that are possible to make a good AI law. But overall, achieving this law, I think, was the biggest success.
Thank you. We're taking questions now as we move to the last segment. And can just check the Q&A box. I can see there are 11 comments there, but generally very good positive comments coming in, very interesting comments. There's a question here from Benjamin. Benjamin Wamono, what role should VR play in legal education and training, and how can it be used to, that's virtual reality, how can it be used to simulate legal scenarios for practical learning? Then there's a question also on the role of artificial intelligence in legal education. That's from Musa. They seem similar. So the role of AI in legal education and research and development for lawyers in Africa, and the role of virtual reality in legal education. Perhaps Pumzile, you can answer that question, or those two questions.
Yeah, so I'm more on the kind of human rights policy and legislation side of technology. I'm sure there is ways to kind of leverage those technologies to aid in improving the work that's done across numerous professions. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's entirely possible to do that. And I think one thing I posted earlier in the comment box, that one thing that I think other African countries can learn from Kenya is just how much you've invested in digital skills and digital education. I'm always telling everyone in South Africa that, you know, Kenya is kind of the Silicon Valley of Africa. And there's so much to learn about educating children from a very young age, how to use the internet, how to use technology, how to infuse kind of teaching kids how to code. So if there is a way to improve what the legal sector does, and absolutely. I've actually kind of, I do a lot of report writing. So I've kind of incorporated AI as a writing aid to help me, you know, with grammar and fixing the way my sentences are structured. So I think if there is a way to do it, I mean, it's there. The way I see AI, is that it's there, generative AI in particular, there to help with tasks that would have required far more human labor. And where it can do that, let's use it for that, while being cognizant that, at least with ChatGPT, that it's error prone. I think in the beginning, there were instances of, I think it was in the US, of a lawyer who asked ChatGPT to write a legal opinion, and it was completely it was wrong. So yeah, I think let's leverage it. Let's use it to improve in all different kinds of sectors, but being aware of the shortcomings and the policymakers and the regulators doing the work to make sure that any harms to society, any harms to human well-being and human rights are ameliorated, but that the benefits are there, and we start right from kids, understanding that our world is becoming far more digitized, and we prepare a new society where digital skills are very infused in the learning, along with learning mathematics, learning science, that digital skills are included as part of the core skills any human being needs to have going into the future.
Thank you. So part of basic education generally. So we have hands raised from the participants. We have Abdullahi Mohammed. If we can enable them to speak.
Yes, thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam President Beneka. I'm very happy to participate in this webinar since yesterday, and I've gained a lot. My question is, I've been hearing that we need to match the regulators or policy with innovation. Much as it is good, but we don't want to derail the issue of innovation and science and technological advancement to regulation. Regulation, as we know, traditionally normally comes and follows when the innovators innovate. And the only pitfall that we have is the issue of consumer protection, where it comes generative AIs. And we have seen a few hiccups and challenges for the few countries that have tried. And even there was an uproar when we didn't understand the issue of scanning of the iris and collecting of personal data in Kenya. But in advanced places, for example, ChatGPT is a famous one. When you see and you Google search an African history, a country like South Africa, when you search in Zulu language, it will give you a decorative history of Nelson Mandela. But when you do it in English, it will give you the negative connotation. The same applies to all our leaders. So there is the lacking gap in the innovation, where information, the synergy and the translation of the generative AI, there is no synergy between the different languages in translation. Things are lost and there is a lot of misinformation. And that is what we need to guard against the consumers. So if there could be a way that we could guide even the developers with institutions like Lawyers Hub and other institutions, we have basic principles in terms of the developers. These are the guiding rules that will take us a long way. But
thank you.
Due to our historical problems, like for example, I was looking at when you put in.
Sorry to cut you short. I'd like to give maybe two more people an opportunity to speak. Okay. But we hear you. You've made good proposal in terms of let's not kill innovation, but let's also have guidelines that will help innovators and developers. Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else who wants to speak or ask a question? Any other question? Okay. There's Vivian. Perhaps as we wait for Vivian to speak, Honorable Catherine would like to comment on Abdullahi's remarks.
Actually, AI, the use of AI for education, whether in education in terms of VR, whether it is in telemedicine, is important, can be facilitative as well as can exclude. So we need in Africa to actually invest in ensuring that where we use VR as an education tool, that all students who need to access that service are enabled to be able to access this service. I remember having to fundraise to get laptops for students in Kianda School during COVID because they went virtual And the kids from the informal settlements who did not have any gadgets, even phones, could not participate in the classes.
Yeah.
So we had to actually do something about that. But a point Abdullahi raises that is important, that the Africans will have to start rewriting their own history.
Yeah.
Because when you go AI, it is what will be on the internet that will be shaping the conversation. So we also, as I said earlier, the African governments must invest a lot more to get our own data, our own information, our own history, our own culture, to be able to participate equally in the space of AI.
Thank you, Honorable Catherine. We have Vivian Kombo, and then we'll wrap up with Idi Kasi. Vivian, please keep it short.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead and keep your comments short or question.
Thank you, I will. My name is Vivian. Thank you so much. I just have this question. I attended a conference recently, and one of the panelists proposed that it's better for Africa to approach legislation and regulation of AI as a bloc, not as individual countries. So, like for instance, Kenya should not just come up with its own regulation and then Uganda and then like that. Rather, it's better if we come together and discuss an approach towards the ethics and regulation of AI. So perhaps I could get a comment from our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Let's take Idi's question, and then we can wrap up with from the panelists. They'll address your question. Idi?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. My name is Idi Kasi, an associate from Rex Attorneys, but also a member of the TLS Advisory Committee on Regional and International Affairs. I have two questions to Arnika Zinke, and regarding the introduction of the UN on AI. We have seen on the UN adopted the seizing the opportunity on safe and secure, trustworthy artificial intelligence system for sustainable development. So I have two questions. First, three. First, the status of it, the draft resolution. But the second one is the resolution calls for bridging the digital divide and ensuring equitable access to AI technologies, especially for developing countries. So what specific strategies on support mechanism do you believe are most critical to achieving this goal? And how can the UN facilitate effective international cooperation to make this reality? And the last question is, the resolution emphasized the need for safe, secure, and trustworthy AI systems, while also acknowledging the challenges of implementing these standards across diverse regulatory landscape. Now, how can the international community act effectively, harmonize these standards to ensure the global adherence without stifling innovation, particularly in developing countries? So I direct mostly to Arnika, but any panelists can add on that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with Annika. Annika, you have a loaded question to deal with. Pumzile, you can also add on to that question. And then we'll wrap up with Honorable Catherine dealing with unified regulation across Africa.
Yeah, thank you. I just a disclaimer, I didn't work on the UN resolution, but I'm somewhat familiar with it. I think overall, there's a lot of very smart people who worked on the resolution. And since that was also a topic from the previous discussion, I think really also making sure that experts are sent to whoever wants to work on legislation, be it on a more transnational level or national level, I think will be key. I'm also thinking, for instance, at the moment, what is happening, so we have the AI Act, and many of the provisions in the AI Act will be able to be applied with through standards. So currently, many international standardizing bodies are working on creating standards for instance, cybersecurity and other provisions that are in the AI Act. So maybe also on the one hand, partaking in these standards, but then also talking to the people who were part of these standardization discussions, I think will be key. Also because as far as I understand, the UN principles are quite similar to the principles from the EU on trustworthy AI. So I think there's quite a lot of overlap. And I think there you really have like quite an established body, international body, of different international standard making organizations to really tap into the ideas that have already been proposed and that are very close to the current technological development. And you also mentioned stifling innovation. And somebody also mentioned it in the chat earlier. I think regulatory sandboxes are a really good way to also help companies comply with regulation, but also incentivize innovation a bit more in the regulatory space. So I think that is a very good model to emulate also when thinking about regulation. And just to get back briefly to one of the previous points made. We also have a lot of issues in the EU with AI systems that are only trained on English-speaking data and not on other languages, and they are very faulty. And I mean, there's also many languages in the EU that are completely underrepresented. So now also some of the ideas in the EU at the moment are to come up with our own systems and own models, also partly publicly funded. So it's interesting to see that this is also a conversation here.
Thank you. There's a lot, I know there's a lot more you could have said, but time is really not on our side. Phumzile?
Yeah, and I think also, I want to speak to the issue about Africa working as a bloc, and I guess my closing statement and my call to action. I would really love to see Africa being taken seriously, by tech companies. The EU is able to form such a strong bulwark because they are a bloc. So if Africa came together and we said, no, you cannot come and bring your content moderation teams to Kenya and pay them less than you do in other countries. If you say, no, you cannot test like they're doing in South Africa, test your iris scanning software in South Africa without meeting these particular regulations. I think we are so much stronger if we work together. We are so much more of a powerful force in saying, if you're going to bring technology in Africa, it must meet these standards. It must be fair. When you're designing your technology, when you're designing ChatGPT, when you're designing large language models, you're going to ensure that while it's not possible to include all African languages, these are the languages that are spoken in Africa. Can you incorporate that at the design stage? So involvement is not only at the tail end where we're saying regulation, we're saying at the beginning when you're designing the technology, this is what you need to bear in mind. You need to bear in mind that there are languages that are not English that need to be put in there. You need to bear in mind that when you're designing this technology, it might be used in a specific area, a rural area. This is what you need to consider. We need to be at the table from the beginning of the design of technology, human rights considerations, regulation. So I am just a big advocate for us doing this together. And I think if we do it together, we are far more powerful and can be taken seriously when we raise issues that of technology and its effects on the African continent.
Thank you, Phumzile. And we wrap up with Honorable Catherine Muma. Your thoughts as you give us your final remarks.
Now, on the issue of one law for Africa, currently the treaty laws would apply. So depending on whether you are monist or dualist, each country's own regime would apply. In Kenya, for instance, since 2010, we can actually apply the international treaties or regional treaties directly as part of law. They are recognized as being part of law in Kenya. But I know many other countries where a treaty would have, again, to be domesticated before it becomes law. So as currently is, in my view, is we can work together in terms of having the minimums in a regional treaty, and then that would have to be domesticated. And when you domesticate, you will have different tweaks that capture, for instance, what is in Kenya that is not in the Gambia. So at the moment, that is what it is. But currently what we need is an AU that can deliver what Phumzile is saying. And I'm hoping that they'll pick my party leader, because I know he's one person who has a vision of a one Africa. If you do so, maybe you'll get there. Now, when it comes to the issue of bridging the digital divide, I would want to go back to what I said earlier. African countries must invest in greater, in spreading the digital infrastructure, in facilitating digital access to all the spaces in their countries in order for all their citizens to equally benefit from what comes with AI. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Catherine Muma. I hope the Gambia has had your appeal on behalf of your party leader. Thank you so much, Annika, for bringing us up to speed in what's happening in the EU. Thank you so much, Phumzile. My directors are really going crazy with the hand signals. My co-host Mbogwa is literally just waiting to jump on here. I want to say thank you so much to our participants, and just to say that there is a lot of legislation happening. There's draft legislation happening in South Africa, in Nigeria, Kenya. We've done a lot of work in Morocco, across the globe. Let's just bring that all together and deal as a block. Thank you very much. We want to take a photo with the panelists. Before you go away, Phumzile, don't go yet. We want to have a nice, beautiful picture with you. Can I ask you all to just give us your best smile? We want to remember you. That's way possible. Thank you so much. And let's take the photo before you leave. One more time, hold on. Yes, and a big round of applause virtually from our participants to our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much. God bless you all.